Yeah, so a little bit about me. I have been programming for about 12 years. I currently am the CEO at a really tiny consignment software company, just me and one other guy. Um, I kind of relevant to my whole Noster journey. I got into Bitcoin in 2020, about the same time that I noticed how social media was completely broken. And so over that period of time, I've been getting more into Bitcoin and getting more into Noster and decentralized social media stuff. Before that, I was just like a web application developer, no special background or anything. But I think I can call myself a cypherpunk now. Um, and in beginning of February, basically not quite a whim, like 10 days of notice or so. But yeah, I took my whole family, drove down from northern Idaho, 1,900 miles to come and live in Austin for 3 months. And we're going back home tomorrow. So it's been super fun to be here, and I really appreciate FUTO's hospitality in that way. So obviously, there's a problem with social media. I don't really have to go back over that with all of you. But one thing to point out is there are a lot of alternative social media platforms out there. That's great, right? Well, not really. I don't really trust Gab or Getter to do censorship on my behalf any more than anyone else. So I spent a lot of time a couple years ago looking into alternatives. Mastodon is kind of the default option. There's Urbit, which is kind of arcane, and then you've got Scuttlebutt, which emphatically doesn't scale. So I looked around and thought, well, someone needs to solve this. And after a year, no one had solved it. So I figured, well, I'm someone. I guess I'll solve it. So I started writing my own protocol about 2 weeks before I found Noster. Took me a while, but eventually I switched over to developing on Noster. I think Noster is great. It's not a perfect protocol by any means, and becomes more imperfect every day as it also improves and supports more use cases. But kind of the value proposition is it's dumb enough to work. Kind of like HTTP, HTML. No one would be terribly enthusiastic about either of those protocols today, but most of the world's economy runs off of them. So good enough for me. Nostr stands for Notes and Other Stuff, transmitted by relays. It's a censorship-resistant open protocol. It was funded by Jack Dorsey starting in December. He doesn't there's no foundation. He just donated a bunch of money to a couple of the developers and called it a day. But we're still running off of that a little bit. No one really gets paid full-time. It's mostly volunteer work. But my best estimate would be maybe 200 or 300 developers working on the protocol. And it's really just loosely based on a bunch of optional Noster improvement proposals. I probably got that wrong, actually. So what's the difference between Mastodon and Noster? Mastodon is good, a good point of reference. Mastodon, an ActivityPub by extension, so the entire Fediverse works on kind of a home server model and then federation. So a user's data, it lives on a particular server, and anyone else who wants to see that data has to pull it from that server. And there's a couple of different effects of this. On Mastodon, censorship is actually more common than on larger companies because larger companies are regulated. Larger companies have a business that they have to run. Mastodon administrators often just shut things down or kick people off because it's their prerogative. It's their hardware, their software. They can do what they want. But it doesn't really solve the censorship problem. And then if you need to move your profile to another server, that's a huge pain from what I've heard. And then, of course, the federation stuff doesn't work super well. So you end up with an echo chamber. I was on the Bitcoin hackers Mastodon for a while, and it was this is a good place to go and read what one person wants to say about Bitcoin, but that was about the extent of what I got out of it. Noster, for those of you who aren't familiar, works on a multi-master architecture. So instead of having a home server, you just choose a bunch of relays. We call them relays. They're just servers. And you publish your data to multiple relays. So you have redundancy of data storage. If 6 of your 10 relays deplatform you for whatever reason, you're not out of luck. You have a backup, and then you can spin up your own and republish or whatever you need to do. Of course, there's a lot of trade-offs that come with that. I wrote a blog post a while ago kind of looking at it from the perspective of the CAP theorem. Noster is available. It's partition tolerant, but it's not consistent. So it's not a good fit for everything that you might want to do. It's not really a general purpose data storage layer. It's more of an interoperability protocol than anything else. However, I've been writing Coracle these last 5 months, starting in November 22. I spent a week sitting in a freezing cold RV coding while my whole family was inside celebrating Thanksgiving. So definitely good dad, husband move right there. But FUTO has been funding it from beginning of February through now. Today's the last day, sadly. So I'll be going home and figuring out what to do after that. I would say it's one of the most mature clients in the space, not necessarily from a technical perspective. That's probably Damus, but from a perspective of embracing what's unique about the protocol. So relays are weird. Noster has relays, and a lot of clients kind of just nod to relays, and some of them even elide relays entirely. So Primal.net is a really good, fast client. It has aggregated stats about the entire network, but there is not anything about relays. So it totally ignores them, which in my mind kind of defeats the purpose, but it's a nice app. So it's all client side. There's a little image hosting and link preview piece that I have, but that's self-hostable if you prefer to swap that out. There's just a setting that you can change. It's 9,000 lines of code, which is a small number, which I think is good. I'd much rather have that than 50,000 lines of code to maintain. It's kind of focused on relay first, but the ideal user is sort of people in a small community. So digital localism is sort of the target, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But as far as like a quick feature list, there's lightning payments, chat, social, search, DMs, lists, authentication with relays, follow and mute, kind of most of the things that you would expect. I don't have polls yet. Oh well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about where I think Noster should go, what I'm really hoping to accomplish, not as an individual because it's too much for me to accomplish, but as a development community. A lot of these things were on my list when I came to FUTO, and I got a lot done, but there's just an amazing number of problems to solve. So there's basically I'm not sure how many things. I can't enumerate them, but I have 3 bullet points, so I'll say 3. There's the kind of social side of things, where with Mastodon you end up in echo chambers. With Noster, you should be able to navigate the network along 2 different axes, right? So you got the social layer, your followers, people who follow you, people you're related to, live next to, that kind of thing. So you should be able to go from place to place within Noster and interact with people in a different way based on that sort of dimension. Topical as well. So you can have a Reddit focused experience, or you can have like a Facebook focused experience. That's the social layer. But then you also have the relay layer. So there's this technical layer, and in my opinion, the technical layer is pointless unless it's aligned with the social layer. So if you're on a relay with a bunch of people who speak Korean, unless you speak Korean, there's not a lot of point in having your data co-located. So finding a way to replicate content along the social graph, but have that kind of match up with relays, I think is the kind of the holy grail of Noster development and architecture. Right now, things are sort of just broadcasted to every relay. So you have these vertical scalability problems. We don't have enough content for it to be a real problem, but all the relays are just growing at the same rate. And that's fine if you have 10 relays because you want some redundancy. But if you have 1,500 relays with all the same content, paying for server costs, that's just basic insanity. So what I'm hoping is that we'll have relays that are sort of special purpose. I probably have a whole bunch of slides that I'm ignoring. Maybe I do. But relays that are special purpose. So like topical relays, where it's like, we only talk about cats here. So if you're not going to talk about cats, don't publish to this relay. Publishing relays. So, they don't accept anything from anyone, but they republish a magazine or republish something that a certain set of users publish to create visibility. So that's one way to get reach. The tension between the ability to broadcast and user control over content recommendations and their experience is really interesting. I talked to my pastor before I came down here, and I was like, what do you want to see solved with social media? Because I'm going to solve it in the next 3 months. And he said the ability to broadcast and the ability for users to see what they want to see. And That's really interesting because if you want to be able to broadcast, you can't force anyone to look at your content. Reach right now is, let's see. No, I'm not there yet. Okay. Reach right now is accomplished by platforms inserting stuff into your feed through algorithms to increase engagement and increase controversy. And it's really an unhealthy way to do it. And you just don't want to see that stuff for the most part. I have one friend who likes advertisements that are targeted, but all the rest of them are not big fans of that. Anyway, so there's a tension there. If you can guard your own experience, then you can't force people, or then people can't force you to see things. So there's everyone's familiar with the Dunbar number. 150 people is the maximum number of people that you can really be friends with at a time. Alex Pacheco, who I don't think is here, but you should try out his app. It's 150 on the Apple on the iPhone store. He clued me into the 2.5 degrees heuristic, where trust is only transitive across 2.5 degrees of separation. So, like, I might know a restaurant, you might trust me. My wife might know a restaurant, and you trust her via me. But my wife's brother might know a restaurant, and you don't care because you don't know that guy. You don't know my wife. And so that trust level drops off between 2 and 3. Alex has a great blog post you should all read that kind of goes through the through the idea that social media has become cancerous, where individual persons' connections have scaled past the limit where it makes sense and it's healthy for society. So keeping those limits down and allowing information to route through the network using those trust relationships as its vehicle, that's also kind of a gold standard. And then finally, with Noster, I don't think it makes sense to ignore relays. It's important for apps to be able to pay attention to relays. So these are all the things that are in my head. I realize that's not super organized, but these are all the things that I'm trying to approach with Noster. But from here on out, I'm going to kind of focus on relays and how I have designed around them. So distributed moderation, I talked a little bit about that, but the way to kind of handle that is you subscribe to follows and downvotes kind of from your network, and selectively too. You can say, like, this person I trust a whole lot to moderate for me, this person I don't trust that much. So that's kind of an open research thing in Noster. Not a lot of work has gone into it yet because it's surprisingly complicated. And then you got relay balkanization. That's just each relay should be special purpose rather than general purpose. And then relay navigation. So the metaphor that I came up with for understanding relays, because it is a really foreign concept to regular users, is kind of a layer in Photoshop. So in Photoshop, you can see the whole picture by collapsing all the layers together, or you can hide everything except for one layer and kind of fiddle with that. So with relays, relays are the layers, and each relay has a bunch of content in it, a bunch of events that are available. And so you can see the whole network by collapsing multiple relays together, or you can isolate a relay and just look at that to see, like, what kind of stuff is in this community, if indeed relays turn out to be a proxy for communities or topics. A global feed might make sense on a smaller trusted relay, but then larger relays you'll have to filter using the social graph. So I'll go ahead and take a pause here and show you a little bit of Coracle. First, I'll show you where I was in the beginning of December when Dorsey tweeted about Noster and about where it was when FUTO picked me up. There's a global feed. There you go. You've also got a profile page, so you can edit it and say what your name is. The image here is base64 encoded and shoved into a Noster event, which is not exactly kosher. But that's pretty much it. It was just proof of concept, really the least you possibly could have. This is where I'm at today. I've got a dark mode and a light mode. I have a feed, but you'll notice it's not global. This is people I actually follow. And then you can also switch over to network to find people that people you follow. So you can kind of like broaden that scope a little bit. I've also got custom feeds. So if I open this up, I can edit my Noster devs feed, which is, or my list, which is people. You can also add topics and then limit it to a particular relay. And you can build these by opening up those layers I talked about. So I've got these little colored dots at the bottom of each post. And if you click on one, you can see the same feed, but for only posts that exist on that one relay. And so right now it's not very useful because most relays have all the content, but eventually it'll be really important. And then, you can add that relay to a list to focus that list down to one or more relays. You can click on a person and add them to your list. You can also add topics to list in the same way. I've also got search. So if I type my wife's name, I can find her, and it's just her name. She has no posts or anything, so but she was game to let me set her up. Scanning is similar. So if we go back to her page, I can grab a QR code. And that one of the neat things about Noster is just the interoperability. So if I scan this from Damus, it will load up my wife's profile on Damus. And there's 10, 15, 20 clients that work the same way. We've got direct messages. I would caution you about them because they leak metadata like there's no tomorrow. But they're at least encrypted. And then you've got chat, public chat rooms, and relays. So if we go to one of these relays, we can just see the global feed, which is a risky operation. So I'll just go back. So let's see. That's where Coracle stands today. And just to kind of reiterate, these relays are the key. So right now, Coracle is not that exciting. But I hope if where I think Noster is going actually happens, Coracle is going to be the client that's most prepared to allow you to navigate the network. So it's very abstract right now, but that's kind of the goal. All right. Another factor that I wanted to address with Coracle is incremental adoption. So my whole goal here is not to create a new Twitter or a new public square. I think in a certain sense, echo chambers are good, actually, right? You have high trust, you have cohesion of values, and it's good to actually talk to people who are like you. And in Alex's article, he talks about how echo chambers that are really toxic and have a purity culture end up drifting naturally to the edges of the larger social network because they're so repugnant to everyone else. So censorship kind of like, it's a hammer that makes the problem worse. Partitioning of social networks happens on its own naturally. So I think it's good to embrace that. So I want to help out my church community, right? These are the people that I know, that I love, that I do business with every day. And so creating a social network that isn't Facebook, where they can go and do commerce or talk about their thoughts on something or post pictures of their kids. Noster is not a great solution right now for private community kind of stuff, like pictures of your kids. I'm hoping to maybe research how to solve that. But what I'm doing right now is basically creating private relays and a white labeled experience. So if I go back over to Coracle here, I've got a white labeled version. If I refresh, the one post that exists will show up. This is my friend Matt. I got him to try it out for me. If I click on this, you can see my reply. That's all the content on this relay. But you can see the color scheme is different. It's blue instead of orange. The grays are slightly different. And I've got a different logo and a different app name up at the top. So, and it also has a relay hard coded into it. So it only talks to that one relay. So data doesn't leak outside. So combine this with authentication and you have pretty close to a private invite-only social network. So that's my next project is as I go home, I'm going to see if I can get my friends onto this and start the 10, 20-year project of moving away from Facebook. So that's what's next, improving the privacy guarantees of relays and white labeled instances. And then if I can get to it, groups and marketplaces. A lot of people are working on marketplaces already, and then groups basically already exist. They're chat rooms, but if you just change the UI, you essentially have a group. Private groups are not at all solved and I don't know if that's solvable using something that something other than what Hayden will show us later. And I'm looking for funding, so if you know anyone who is interested in this and has money, send them my way. Thank you to all of you for listening to me ramble for 20 minutes. Thank you to FUTO for having me here. It really has been a dream come true. I never thought I'd be an open source software developer. It's pretty cool. And that's it.
Nice talk. As you mentioned, your friend Matt, and pulling up your wife's empty feed. But Coracle is one of the most popular Nostr clients. Do you want to talk about how many clients there are and what how popular a Nostr is, or how popular Coracle is?
Yeah. So I purposely said that Coracle was one of the most mature clients because it isn't one of the most popular ones. Back in January, December, when everyone was jumping over to Noster, Coracle was a little bit broken and was loading really slowly. And so I kind of missed the boat as far as adoption goes. Hopefully I can stick around and get more people on. But yeah, so the biggest client is Damus. It's the iPhone client. It's I don't know how many users it has. I have about 1,500 weekly active users. Nostr, the protocol, has roughly 18,000 weekly active users, and Damus claims to have 100,000. So, I guess take that with a grain of salt. And then, so that's the iPhone one, and that's the most advanced probably from a technical standpoint. But it's kind of just like a Twitter clone. You got a Twitter clone on Amethyst, which is kind of your Android one. Then there's Iris.io, Iris.2, which used to run on GunDB, which is a DHT implementation. And he switched over to Noster. So whenever anyone who's a DHT evangelist comes and yells at me, I just ignore them, basically. Sorry if any of you are DHT advocates. Then you got Snort.social, which is kind of the web Twitter clone. They do a lot of stuff with Zaps, which is Lightning micropayments. And then you've got Gossip, which is a desktop client that's focused on relay navigation, similar to me. That's my favorite other client. And then there's 30, 40, 50, 100 other ones. One guy's been working on a lot of special purpose ones. So he's got a client for streaming music and commenting on the songs. But it's been really funny because the comments just go to the global feed rather than being attached to a message related to the song. And so the other day, Fiat Jeff, the creator of Noster, just tweeted out, "Is this Lana Del Rey?" And everyone made a lot of fun of him. Yeah, there's no edit or delete right now, which is interesting. I mean, there's kind of a delete, but it's hard to do. So you have to watch what you say and stick to your guns.
Thank you. And then last question. You made a very interesting comment about the technical layer should be aligned with the social layer. Can you talk more about how you think about that? It seems important for the adoption of these sorts of things, perhaps.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this for over a year now, actually. This was part of the inspiration for the protocol that I was writing. I wrote a white paper and nothing else. But if you have a bunch of relays and redundancy, it doesn't do you much good if everyone who is on the same server are people that you're not interested in talking to, and then the people you're interested in talking to live on a different server. You kind of have to straddle all these servers, and you have to do all the routing and stuff. And it also kind of breaks down the natural partitioning of the network, where if you want to have an effective search function, you need to be able to search all the relays, which means that you need a centralized search provider. But if your communities are kind of located loosely on just a couple different relays, obviously still redundant enough to have the censorship resistance that you want, you can have a much smaller search service or content recommendation service, or profile index or something like that. And the technical requirements, the computing requirements for something like that can still be within the realm of hobbyists, rather than having giant companies with data warehouses indexing the entire network. So that's the idea behind that is and I didn't really get into this, but I have a blog post on my blog about it. But if you can if you can make the relays the routing layer for the network and ask the relay that you're a member of, who do you suggest I ask when who do you suggest I ask to search your data? And they'll say, well, I trust this search provider. And then users don't have to be the ones switching search providers when the search provider goes rogue or gets too centralized or something. You have the relays just say, well, actually, I recommend this other one now. Whether that works out in practice, I don't know. Like, obviously, Google's empire is built on search. So they've done it once. They've centralized search once. They'll probably do it again. But that's what I'm hoping, is that we can avoid that this time. It's similar to Bitcoin miners, actually, right? So you've got all these pools, right? And they're kind of centralized, which sort of undermines the value proposition of Bitcoin. But the miners can switch. Bitcoin users don't have to care. As long as the miners are, stewarding the trust that's been given to them, you have a much lower friction. You have a lot less friction for fixing that centralization problem if needed.
Cool. Yeah, it's a super interesting idea to have the relays doing, like, kind of helping you find content. So it's not like full like server federation where it's having to replicate things, but it's still kind of a midway point, seems like, where it's helping you find things.
Yeah, and a good client is gonna navigate the network. So you want to see someone's posts. Well, don't look at your own relays. Look at his relays. And then every note has like a recommendation for, like, well, here's the location that I saw the note that I'm replying to. So you can break down those connections through censorship or just relays going offline or whatever. But there are a lot of hints throughout the network that help you sort of navigate through the social graph. Cool. Thanks, Steve. Yeah. Hello.
So you mentioned you had you're using basically like social graph traversing to recommend posts. I find myself a lot on the home feed rather than the subscription feed of YouTube. And I kind of like algorithmic recommendations. Is there a future plan to maybe implement that, where you can like choose the algorithm you want or something like that?
Yeah, totally. I think the social graph is a great place to start. And I was talking to Charles, like, not having recommendations inserted into your feed all the time has already improved just the quality of conversation on Noster. You actually want to engage with the people that you're seeing all the time. So, like, it's already better than Twitter, despite being the dumbest possible implementation of content recommendations. But yeah, like, so curation models are totally possible and definitely going to happen eventually. And that can take a lot of forms. You might have like an API that your client calls to ask for recommendations explicitly and then show those to you. You might have a relay that you subscribe to and you say, like, well, I just want to see some interesting stuff, so I'll go to this relay, and maybe it's like baseball stats or like celebrity gossip or whatever, and then it's just a curated feed of that stuff. So it's not really like recommendations. It's actually an aggregated source. So you get kind of a publisher sort of setup, and you just go to the publisher you want to look at, or you group a couple of different publishers into a list, and there you go. You have your custom feed. Inserting things into your regular followers feed is, I mean, you could do that the same way, but I don't really know if that's what people want, to be switching gears all the time. I don't know, but yeah, both options are out there, and there's a million clients, so everyone's going to do it differently. And yeah, let a million flowers bloom, or whatever the phrase is. Thanks.
If you'd like a suggestion, a feature that I'm looking for in social networks is like events, because that's like the only thing that I think keeps people on Facebook, to be honest. And since I've like left most of the social networks, and I don't have any social networks with any of my like in-person friends, it's really hard to coordinate events among them. And I feel like that's something that's really nice, like local. Just like in the context of your church, that would be like super easy, an easy sell for like a local community to like host a relay, to host those sorts of that sort of thing. You don't really want the whole world to see it. And if you could also add like extra layers of only these people can see it, and if they're outside of the network or coming to don't have like Noster, you give them like some pin and they can see it or something like that, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've had the same thought. I think that's a great way to get people on, right? like you get an event site, and you say, well, you can give me your email or like an invite code or something like that, and we'll create a private key for you. You can take it or you can leave it. You can throw it away if you want, or you can keep it, and like now you have access to our like social media thing. So yeah, I think that's super exciting.
One of the things you mentioned was you talked a lot about having like different relays for like a different like say like a hobbyist group, for example, right? Well, like how do you see it like expanding out to like other groups that aren't very technical tech savvy? Because like right now all I see is like, a lot of people who are like Bitcoin or like anyone that's like into tech, but like how do you see like something like a knitting group kind of getting onto these platforms, or do you see them getting on at all?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. There's a lot of different ways. Relays are again, what is special about Noster? But relays are this concept that no one wants to deal with. So you have that tension, and maybe we won't be able to solve that. Because if we ignore relays, we basically end up with a bunch of centralized databases again, which totally defeats the purpose. So if that's the direction we're going, I am not interested in Noster. As far as getting regular people on, the public-private key encryption stuff is really similar to the relay concept. It's not impossible to learn. People are slowly learning it. It's simpler than the legacy banking system. Has its own problems, but it's like, over time, I guess I've heard people say that the previous generation has to die off before, major cycles can occur. So I think this is going to be like that, where it won't be mainstream for 20 or 30 years at least. But so right now we're just in the development and exploration phase. But so the white labeling thing, my communal relay and front end, it's a centralized service, right? I control the client. I control the one relay that it talks to. There's no mention of relays in that version. Maybe I forgot to show you, but this is my like church one. And if I go to there's no relays tab. If I hover, there's no little dot that shows me what relay. It's completely transparent. And so what you can do is you can deploy these little tiny community relays and white labeled clients to different communities, organizations, businesses, whatever. And then 10 years down the road, when you have 500,000 or 1 million organizations onboarded, people might be interested in flipping the switch and saying like, well, I'd really like to talk to this other company that we're doing some work with or whatever, or just open it up and say like, sure, we'll have the entire global Noster network available. And then you just add that button and there you go. Everyone's on board onto Noster automatically just because they were using their company's chat. So I think that's a promising approach, but it's bigger than I am. So.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, everyone.